A 10-year-old black girl once drew a powerful Korean mafia boss being shot in her sketchbook, and the next day it happened exactly the way she drew it. Mom, I drew that man yesterday. Ruth turned slowly, ice cream cone still in her hand, and looked at her daughter. What man, Sammy? Samantha pointed across the busy Seoul Street. That one, stepping out of the black car. I drew him last night. I drew the gun, and he got shot. Ruth followed her daughter's finger, and her stomach dropped. Tall man, gray coat, black car. Exactly like Samantha had described when she came down from her room for breakfast that morning, a sketchbook tucked under her arm, saying she'd had a strange dream she needed to draw. Then the shot cracked through the afternoon air like a whip. The man in the gray coat stumbled. His hand flew to his shoulder. His bodyguards collapsed around him instantly, 4 men moving as one, pulling him behind the car door as screams broke out across the street and people scattered in every direction. Ruth grabbed Samantha and crushed her against her chest. Don't look, don't move. But Samantha was already talking, voice muffled against her mother's coat. Mom, the bullet was supposed to hit his chest. I moved it. I drew a little arrow and I moved it to his shoulder. Mom, it worked. It actually worked. Ruth's whole body went cold. Across the street, through the chaos with people running and screaming, a pair of dark eyes cut straight through all of it and found Samantha. Nicholas Hune had been shot 3 times in his life. The first time, he was 22. The second, 29. Both times, he had walked away without flinching, stitched himself up, and gone back to work the same evening. This time was different. Not because of the bullet. The bullet was nothing. A clean graze through the outer shoulder muscle, barely worth the bandage his doctor would wrap around it later. What stopped Nicholas cold, standing behind his car door with blood soaking through his coat sleeve, was the little girl across the street. She was maybe 9 or 10 years old. Caramel skin, natural hair pulled back, a sketchbook pressed against her chest like she was shielding it from the world. His head of security, Daug appeared at his shoulder. Sir, we need to move, now. The woman and the girl, Nicholas said, pointing out. Find out who they are before they leave this street, he commanded. Ruth had one plan, get Samantha away from that street, get home, lock the door, and act like none of it had happened. They made it 4 blocks before she pulled Samantha into a narrow alleyway and crouched down to her level. Listen to me very carefully, baby girl. Ruth held her daughter's face in both hands. You do not repeat what you said back there. Not to your teacher, not to your friends, not to anyone. Do you understand me? She said, her voice filled with fear. Samantha searched her mother's eyes. But Mom, I drew it. I didn't just dream it. I actually changed it. The bullet was going to his heart and I... Samantha. Ruth's voice cracked. Please. Her eyes stared softly into little Sammy's eyes. It was told with fear. Samantha went quiet. Ruth straightened up and looked back toward the street. The black car was gone. The crowd was still buzzing. Far away in the street, police sirens were getting closer. She took her daughter's hand and walked fast. She did not know that 2 of Nicholas's men were already 30 steps behind them. Before we go any further, I have to stop and ask you something. Where in the world are you watching this right now? Drop your location in the comments. Are you up late or catching this in the middle of your day? And if this is your first time here, welcome. You just walked into a place where stories get under your skin and stay there. Hit that subscribe button, tap the like, and do not go anywhere, because what Nicholas is about to discover about that little girl will change everything you think you know about this story. Now, let's keep going. Nicholas did not sleep that night. He sat in his penthouse with his shoulder freshly bandaged, with a glass of water untouched on the table beside him and a single printed photograph in his hand. A still frame from street security footage, the little girl outside the ice cream shop, and the sketchbook opened. Daug's hand stood near the door. Her name is Samantha, sir. She is 10 years old. Her mother is Mrs. Ruth, an American citizen. They've lived in Seoul for 11 years. The mother works as a freelance translator. No criminal record, no known connections to any rival organization. Nicholas stared at the photograph. The sketchbook. I want to see what's inside it. Sir, the mother keeps it close. The girl carries it everywhere, Daug reported. Then find a way. Nicholas set the photograph down. Derek Tan nodded and left. Nicholas turned back to the window. Seoul sprawled below him, millions of lights burning through the dark of night that had fallen. A 10-year-old girl had known exactly where his bullet would land. He needed to understand how possible that was. Derek's team photographed the sketchbook the following morning while Ruth was making breakfast and Samantha was washing her face in her bedroom. They didn't know how one had sneaked in through Sammy's window. It took 2 minutes in the apartment to get it clean and done. Ruth never knew. The images were on Nicholas's table by 9. He went through them slowly, page by page. Drawings of streets, buildings, strangers, weather. Some were carefully drawn, while some were rough. All of them dated in small, neat numbers in the bottom corner. Then he reached the page from 2 nights ago. He stopped. The man in the gray coat was unmistakable. The black car, the shooter positioned behind a newspaper stand to the left, exactly where his man had found the gunman. The bullet's trajectory was drawn in a sharp, straight line, aimed directly at the center of his chest. And then a small curved arrow, penciled lightly, almost gently, bending the bullet's path away from his heart, redirecting it to his shoulder. Nicholas sat very still for a long moment staring at the drawing. She had not drawn what was going to happen. She had drawn what she wanted to happen, and reality had followed her pencil. Nicholas met Ruth the next morning. He chose a small cafe 3 streets from Samantha's school, arrived before she did, and sat at a corner table where he could see every entrance. Ruth walked in and stopped when she saw him. She recognized him immediately. Ruth turned around, her eyes swept through the corners of the cafe, checking exits, counting his men. She was smart. Nicholas had already known that from Derek's report, but seeing it in person was different. She walked to the table and sat down without being invited. "From the message you sent me, I'm sure you had someone go through my daughter's sketchbook," she asked, maintaining a straight facial expression. "Yes," Nicholas replied, staring at her. "What I'm about to say is going to be the only warning you get," Ruth said quietly. "Stay away from her." Her voice was coarse. Nicholas placed the printed photograph of the drawing between them, the bullet path, the curved arrow. Ruth looked at it and said nothing. "She didn't predict what happened to me," Nicholas said. "If I'm not mistaken, she created it. She changed the outcome before it happened." He leaned forward slightly. "Do you understand what that means? Do you understand what happens when the wrong people find out a child can do this? She will become a weapon," he said. Ruth's eyes stayed on the photograph. "How long?" he asked. A long silence laced in the air. "Since she was 4, Ruth replied. "And you've been hiding it?" Nicholas asked. "I've been protecting her." Ruth's voice was sharp and low. "There is a difference." "Not anymore, there isn't." Nicholas pulled the photograph back. "Because I found out in less than 24 hours, and I am not the most dangerous man looking for an advantage in this city. I am simply the first one who got to you." He held her gaze. "I want to help you keep her safe." Ruth studied him across the table. "Why would you want to do that? Why do you think I would believe you?" "Because she saved my life," he said, "and I pay my debts." Ruth looked at him for a long time. Then she exhaled slowly and looked away. She did not say yes. Later, Nicholas went back to his penthouse and called in Derek. "The mother, Ruth. I want to get to know her better before Seoul. Go dig in further on her before she came to Korea. I want everything," Nicholas said, his voice slightly filled with confusion. He could sense something fishy about Ruth and her daughter, Samantha. Derek called back in 4 hours of leaving the penthouse. Nicholas was standing at his window when his phone rang. He picked up on the first ring. "Sir," Derek's voice was calm. "Mrs. Ruth arrived in Seoul 11 years ago. She came from London. Before London, she was in Hong Kong. And before Hong Kong, there was a brief pause. She was here, in Seoul, under a different name, Miss Ruth Cha. She lived here for 2 years, between the ages of 21 and 23. "Is that all?" Nicholas asked. "No, sir," Derek continued quietly. "During that period, she was connected to your household." The line suddenly became very still. "She was your father's translator," Derek said. "She worked in your family home for 14 months, and according to the staff records we pulled," another pause, "she left abruptly. There was no notice. The departure was logged the same week your mother, Rachel Hong, dismissed 3 members of staff." Nicholas said nothing for a very long time. He actually remembered Ruth. He just needed to be sure and clear his thoughts. His mother had told him Ruth had returned to her family abroad, that she'd asked for no contact. He'd believed it because he had no reason not to believe his mother. "Derek?" Nicholas called slowly from the phone. "Samantha is 10 years old." "Yes, sir." Ruth left Seoul 11 years ago. Another brief silence lurked in the air. Yes, sir, Derek said carefully. Nicholas set the phone down without ending the call and stood very still by the window. 11 years ago, Ruth had left Seoul. 10 years ago, Samantha was born. He pulled up the photograph of Samantha on his phone, studied her face properly for the first time. The structure of it, the line of her jaw, the way her eyes looked just like his. Could there be some coincidence? He thought to himself. To clear his thoughts, he grabbed his car keys, grabbed his phone, putting it over his ear. I will call you back, Derek, he said, and hung up. Instantly went to his parking lot, got into his car, and drove straight to Ruth's apartment. She opened the door and looked at his face and immediately tried to close it again. He put his hand flat against the door, stopping her from closing it. Ruth, he called out softly as he held the door firmly. She's mine, he asked quietly. Ruth went completely still. Tell me I'm wrong, he said. Look me in the eye and tell me Samantha is not my daughter. The silence stretched out long and painful between them. Ruth's hand dropped slowly from the door. She stepped back and let him in. They sat at her kitchen table. How she had loved him quietly and completely in the 14 months she worked in his family home. How his mother, Rachel Hong, had called her into a private room one morning and placed a plane ticket on the table between them. How Rachel had looked at her with that cold, composed face and said, You are carrying my son's child. That child will never carry the Hong name. Leave Seoul by Friday or I will make sure you have nothing left to leave with. Ruth had been 23 years old at the time, alone in a foreign country, without money, without family, without a single person powerful enough to stand between her and Rachel Hong, Nicholas's mother. She had taken the ticket. Nicholas listened without speaking. His hands were flat on the kitchen table and his jaw was set so hard the muscle in his cheek flickered. I didn't know you had her, he finally said. His voice was rough. I didn't know. I know you didn't, Ruth said. I know you would have been there for her, Ruth said again, slowly cutting him off in his utterances. A long silence settled between them. From Samantha's room came the soft scratch of pencil on paper. Nicholas looked toward the sound. He doesn't know? He asked. No. He exhaled slowly. And the birth, the hospital, were there any... He stopped. Ruth frowned. Any what? Complications, he said carefully. Anything unusual about the delivery? Ruth shook her head. It was difficult, but straightforward. She was born healthy. Why do you ask? Nicholas pulled out his phone and placed it on the table between them. On the screen was a document Derek had sent to him while he was driving to her place, a hospital record he had pulled during his investigation. Ruth leaned forward and read it slowly. Then she read it again. Her face changed. This says 2 babies, she whispered. Yes, Nicholas said. That's not... Ruth shook her head sharply. That's not right. I had just 1 baby. They placed her on my chest. I held her. There was only 1. Her voice broke. There was only 1 baby. She repeated again, lost in shock. The doctor who delivered Samantha, Nicholas said carefully, was a man named Park Sung-il. 3 weeks after your delivery, he disappeared from Seoul. 8 months later, he reappeared on my mother's private payroll. He held Ruth's gaze. You gave birth to twins, Ruth. The second baby was taken before you were fully conscious. It was recorded as a stillbirth. But you were never told. Ruth stood up so fast her chair scraped back against the floor. No, her voice was shaking now. No, I would have known. I would have... You were heavily sedated during the final stage of delivery, Nicholas said. It's in the records. Derek found all that out, he said. Ruth pressed both hands over her mouth. Ruth did not sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall, replaying every moment of that delivery room 11 years ago. The bright lights, the exhaustion, the strange heaviness that had come over her in the final hour. Heavier than pain, heavier than fear. She'd assumed it was the medication. Now, she understood it differently. Nicholas had stayed until midnight, then left quietly, promising to return in the morning. Ruth had stood at the closed door for a long time after he left, listening to the silence of the apartment, listening to Samantha breathe steadily in the next room. Her daughter had a twin. Somewhere in the city, or beyond it, there was another child, born from the same night, the same mother, the same blood, raised by another woman. Ruth pressed her fist against her mouth and breathed through it. Nicholas searched carefully over the next 2 weeks. He did not tell Samantha who he was. Ruth had asked him to wait, to let her find the right moment, the right words to use, and he had agreed, though it cost him something he could not name to walk past his own daughter in the hallway of her building and simply nod like a stranger. He positioned 2 men outside their building around the clock. He rerouted his own movements so that his enemy's attention stayed fixed on him and away from the small apartment 3 districts away. But word was already moving through the wrong circles. Derek brought the report on a Thursday evening, setting it on Nicholas's desk with a careful expression of a man delivering bad news to someone. 3 separate intelligence networks have picked up chatter about a child and soul with an unusual ability, Derek said. No name yet, no confirmed location, but the description matches Samantha. Nicholas looked at the report without touching it. How long before they narrow it down? At the current rate, 2 weeks, maybe less. Double the security, he said, and say nothing to the mother yet. I don't want her frightened into running. And the child, sir? Nicholas was quiet for a moment. Keep her safe. That is the only instruction that matters. It was Samantha who found him out. She simply drew him one Saturday afternoon, sitting at her desk in the way she always did when her hands started moving without her permission, and when she looked down at the finished page, Nicholas was in it, standing outside their building, watching their window. She brought the drawing to Ruth. Ruth looked at it for a long time. Then she sat her daughter down at the kitchen table and told her the truth, all of it. Samantha listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her, sitting very straight with her hands folded on the table, her face still and serious in the way that meant she was processing something too large for quick words. When Ruth finished, the apartment was very quiet. He's my father, Samantha said slowly. Yes, Ruth replied. Samantha nodded once, then, and I have a brother? Ruth's throat tightened. We don't know where he is yet, or what I know where he is, Samantha said quietly. Ruth stared at her. Samantha slid her sketchbook across the table and opened it to a page near the back. A drawing Ruth had not seen before. A boy, roughly Samantha's age, sitting alone in a large dark room, surrounded by drawings pinned to every wall. His head was bent over a sketchbook identical to Samantha's. I drew this 3 days ago, Samantha said. I didn't know who he was then. She looked up at her mother, but I do now. Nicholas came that evening. Samantha opened the door before he could knock. He looked down at her. She looked up at him. It was the first time they had been close enough to see each other properly, and the resemblance, now that Nicholas was looking for it, was so clear it almost stopped his breath. The line of her jaw, the stillness in her eyes. His own face, softened and redrawn in someone smaller and infinitely braver. I know who you are, Samantha said. Nicholas crouched down to her level. I know you do. You've been watching our building. Yes. Samantha studied him with those steady eyes. Then she held up her sketchbook, open to the drawing of the boy in the dark room. His name is Elvis, she said. Your mother has him, and he's been drawing too. She paused. But his drawings are different from mine. Nicholas looked at the drawing. His chest tightened. I need you to take us to him, Samantha said. Samantha. Ruth appeared behind her daughter, hand on her shoulder. Mom. Samantha's voice was gentle but immovable. He's my brother, and he's been alone in that room his whole life. She looked back at Nicholas. Nobody taught him how to use what he has. Nobody told him there was another way. Her fingers tightened on the sketchbook. That's why his drawings hurt people. It's the only thing he's ever been shown. 3 days later, a drawing appeared on Samantha's desk in her room that she had not put there. She found it at 2 a.m, waking suddenly, the way she always did when something was wrong, and sat up to find a single page lying open on her desk. Nicholas Hune, lying still, eyes closed, dark shading spread beneath him like a tide. She picked up the page and walked to her mother's room. Ruth called Nicholas without wasting a second. He arrived within minutes, took one look at the drawing, and for the first time since Samantha had known him, which was not long but long enough, she saw something move through his face that looked like genuine fear. Elvis drew this, Samantha said, taking the drawing back from him and looking at it carefully. He drew this to warn us, not to threaten, to warn. She traced the edges of the image lightly with one finger. He's scared too. He's been told his whole life that this is all he can do, destroy things, and some part of him doesn't want to. Nicholas looked at her. Samantha, that is not something you can know from a drawing. I know it, she said simply, because I drew it too. Before I knew what my drawings did, when I was very small, I drew things that hurt people, and I stopped because I showed myself I could draw something different. She looked up at him. Nobody has ever shown Elvis that. Nicholas found Rachel Hong the following evening. His mother was sitting in the drawing room of her private estate on the edge of the city, composed and elegant and completely unsurprised to see him walk through the door. Where is he? Nicholas said. Rachel set down her teacup. Nicholas. Where is my son, Mother? The word landed between them like something heavy dropped from a height. Rachel Hong looked at her son for a long moment, at the anger in his face, at something beneath the anger that was rawer and harder to look at, and she said nothing. That silence told Nicholas everything. He turned and walked through the estate until he found the room Samantha had drawn. Large, dark, drawings covering every wall. A boy sitting alone in the middle of it. Elvis looked up when the door opened. He had Nicholas's jaw and Ruth's eyes, the same combination that had stopped Nicholas's breath when he first looked properly at Samantha, and he was holding a pencil so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. They stared at each other across the room. I know who you are, Elvis said. His voice was carefully flat. I know who you are, too, Nicholas said quietly. He stepped into the room. And I am sorry. For every year you spend in this room, for everything my mother told you and everything she kept from you. He stopped a few feet away. You have a sister. Her name is Samantha, and she asked me to bring you home. Elvis said nothing, but his grip on the pencil loosened slightly. Samantha was waiting at the apartment door when they arrived. She looked at her brother for a long time, this boy who was her mirror and her opposite, shaped by darkness where she had been shaped by love. And then she held out her sketchbook. I want to show you something, she said. Elvis looked at the sketchbook, then at her. What? Every drawing I ever changed, she said simply. Every time I moved a bullet or redirected a storm or gave someone a different ending than the one they were heading toward. She pressed the book into his hands. You can do everything I can do, Elvis. You just never knew you could choose differently. Elvis looked down at the book in his hands. For the first time in his life, the future felt like something other than a wall and being evil. Power is not the difference between people. Choice is. Samantha and Elvis were born the same. Same hands, same gifts, same blood. But one was shown love and one was shown fear. And for a long time, that made them into completely different people. The truth this story leaves behind is simple and it is heavy. What we are given is never as powerful as what we choose to do with it. Elvis had spent his whole life believing he could only destroy. It took his sister, a 10-year-old girl with a pencil and an open heart, to show him that was never true. Now I want to hear from you. What moment hit you hardest in this story? Was it the bullet, the twins, or the moment Samantha handed Elvis the sketchbook? Drop everything in the comments below. Your thoughts, your feelings, what you want to see happen next between these two. Your comments are how you speak to me directly, and I read every single one. If you want to see part 2, where Elvis learns to use his drawings to heal instead of destroy, tell me below and we will make it happen. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this with someone who needs a story today, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.